All right, I'm Matt McNulty. I lead the Polymer team here at Google. That's a little small. I blame Eric. He actually made these slides. Not the slides, but the framework for them. So an interesting, my Twitter handle is there. Feel free to tweet at me anytime. About every 3 months or so, I start getting tweets from mostly women in the UK saying that they love me. Because apparently there's an actor there whose name is also Matt McNulty, and they follow me instead. So feel free to tweet at me because I think my most recent 10 tweets or so are all about that because I have to repeatedly point out that I'm not an actor. But yeah, so apparently he's been in something that's not so great right now. But there's still a few people that love him apparently. So it's a nice little ego stroke. So first thing I want to show you, we have this designer tool, and we showed it the beginnings of it at I/O last year, and it's evolved quite a bit since then. It's actually all new code since then. And a few people are going to be showing it tonight, so I just wanted to introduce it really quickly. So this is like what Steve Jobs would call a hobby, right? This is not actually our thing we're working on, but it's particularly useful for showing off components, right? Eric talked about it for a little while, just about how composable these things are and how interop works and how it's really, really awesome that you can do things like drag out a whole scaffold that's built into an element. And I can maximize it. And if I flip to the code view, which is very, very small as well, you can see that all that is really just a little bit of markup. So it's really, really pretty cool. And Rob's going to demo this a whole lot more in a little bit, as is Salesforce. So it'll be pretty cool for you. But I just kind of wanted to show that and just show how powerful Polymer is and how you can build a lot with just a little bit of markup. So how did I do that? Polymer. That's our pretty new logo that you all now have toys of, which is pretty awesome, by the way. We all spent about 4 hours trying to make them look like the logo. That's actually pretty challenging if you don't have something to work on. But so the big question is, what is Polymer? So Polymer is a library utilizing web components, which you just learned about, for building elements and applications. So that's a lot of words. None of them have a lot of meaning other than web components at this point. But components, elements, applications, like everyone talks about that. These are very generic words. So really, what is Polymer? So Polymer is actually a new kind of thing, right? This is something that we need to do a better job of explaining to people. So this is not like the things that have come before. Web components shipping is a major inflection point kind of in the history of web development. So there's going to be kind of the things that came before and the things that came after, and the way you build web applications is going to change regardless of whether you use Polymer or not. This is the future of web development, and it's the future we were always promised, right? Way back in the day, like this is the hoverboard. This is the thing that we were told, you can build applications this way. This is the way it's going to be, but it's actually here now. And the only thing out there that's in any way similar is actually Xtags, which Daniel Buckner is going to come and talk about in a little bit. Basically, everything else is, we're still out in front right now and just trying to figure this whole situation out. And these things haven't even shipped completely in the browser yet, so we're kind of out in front. So Polymer uses web components. Eric talked about web components quite a bit. But the major differentiator with Polymer and things that came before is Polymer doesn't paper over the platform. So as everyone in this room is probably painfully aware, frameworks have had to deal with an deficient web platform for a couple decades now. It doesn't provide enough functionality out of the box to be useful for people. And web components and object observe and a template tag change that because the platform doesn't need to be papered over anymore. So we came to Google to prove this. So to prove that the specs were good. We did a lot of work on that. And also prove that they're useful, that you can build something new out of this and that these things are useful right out of the box. So wait, Polymer isn't a framework? I keep calling it a library. I'm saying previous frameworks, things like that. It's a little confusing. So with Polymer, the thing we like to say is the framework is DOM, right? So instead of building a framework on top of the web platform, now that the web platform is extensible, now that it has scoping via Shadow DOM, you can actually build things and just use DOM methods again, right? So when we built Enyo, the fastest way to render something on the page was to splat out a big long string in inner HTML. And we came to Google and joined the Chrome team, and we're like, well, this is the fastest way. And they were like, no, it's not. And we went and looked, and it wasn't anymore. Like they had actually made creating DOM nodes imperatively faster. So our mission here is to use the platform, and the platform is DOM. And DOM is much more functional now than it used to be. And our component model is custom elements, right? We don't need a component model built out of JavaScript because custom elements now provide that same functionality in the platform. And scoping, again, is provided by Shadow DOM. So a lot of people think that Shadow DOM provides a level of security, or that the JavaScript in it runs in a different context, and none of that's actually true. That would be useful for some cases, but what this really does is kind of the equivalent of classes in almost any other language, right? It's scoping that you can pierce the boundaries of if you really need to. And it's still really, really useful as is, even though this isn't quite what people might think it is by the name Shadow DOM. So am I hating on other frameworks? No, we actually wrote quite a few of them. So there's people on the team that helped write Dojo. We all wrote Enyo, and now we're here doing this. But there's a ton of great JS frameworks out there right now, and they all had to do like superhuman things in order to deal with the web platform the way it exists right now. They didn't work on the Chrome team. They didn't have web components. They didn't have any of that stuff. And in my opinion, actually, like too much talent is being spent working on frameworks, like papering over deficiencies in the platform. And it's time to change that. It's time to give those people the ability to build stuff beyond frameworks that's actually, that's interoperable. So brief word about polyfills. So Eric touched on this briefly, but polyfills are kind of a bridge to the future that's available right now. Polyfills were also a lot of work to create. So we built those polyfills for web components and put them out there. About a year ago at I/O, when we unveiled Polymer with its current name and everything, we've been open source from the beginning. The polyfills represented about 80% of the work we had actually done to that point. So we presented it as all as Polymer because this was new enough for everyone else. Turns out, like, the polyfills are really, they're something that is supposed to go away over time and is kind of a utilitarian thing, and they're not actually Polymer. They're not what we're providing. Polymer is the layer above the polyfills. So you see, I see it all the time where people are like, oh, Polymer is this set of polyfills. That's actually not true. The polyfills were a means to an end. They're a bridge to the future platform. And the other thing about polyfills is that they actually focus on compatibility over everything else. Their goal is not performance. If you can make a really highly performant polyfill, you wouldn't need the native features. So a lot of times you get questions about that, and it's like, you know what? The idea is that Polymer works everywhere because of the polyfills, but it's awesome on Chrome because it has a native. All right, so let's dig into Polymer. So Polymer is a sugaring layer on top of the polyfills that lets you build your own element sets and apps. Again, sometimes we hear people say, oh, that's just for building elements, but it's actually for building everything if you want. Your element can be an input tag, your element can be an entire app, right? Eric did a great job of showing a bunch of examples of all that. And web components, like, why did we have to build Polymer? Well, web components are completely awesome, but by design, they're a really low-level primitive. I mean, it's in the name primitive. And that's the way primitives should be, right? They should be, maximally flexible, maximally powerful, and maybe not necessarily as focused on developer ergonomics. So using them together right now on their own is kind of tricky. There's a lot of boilerplate. There's a lot of ways that you can go wrong really, really quickly. Polymer's whole job is to make this way easier. So the other thing is Polymer's opinionated. So the things that are in the lower levels in the platform layer are standards track. But Polymer is where the opinion lies. And we actually did some changes here recently where a lot of the data binding stuff we have was down in the platform layer, and it's really not actually ready for standards track yet. So we pulled it up into Polymer. And it makes Polymer a little bigger, but it really streamlines our story and makes it really clear that platform layer is intended to go away and go away fairly soon. And the other thing about Polymer is these are conventions. These aren't standards, right? These have not gone through the standards process, and as such, they represent our opinion, right? So what is that opinion? What's our philosophy? So components all the way down. Thank you, sir. So we like to build things out of smaller pieces and compose them together. And honestly, we feel like that's one of the major keys to building a really big scalable application. So a lot of people believe that strong typing is a key, and it definitely is. And one of the things that we believe is separation of concerns, right? If you got a developer and he can worry about just the small composable piece that's in front of him that has one job to do that's reusable, you can compose that into bigger and bigger pieces, right? Smaller reusable components, they compose into larger components, those components compose into applications. And you can put those applications wherever you want. And scoping enables this composition. And again, it's scoping. And Shadow DOM's about scoping, not security. Not that I'm trying to nail that home. So the other piece of Polymer is that everything is an element. So this is our implementation of components, right? Custom elements are the components of Polymer. We use them absolutely everywhere. Eric touched on this, right? We've got UI elements. We also have, you can wrap an API. We have a core local storage. And local storage is a notoriously tricky API to deal with. And you can throw a core local storage element on your page, link to it using data binding from any data source, and it persists. And it's that simple. It's really like a couple mustache elements, and you're set. And even data, right? We started out like JSON is the format data should be in, and we decided to really push the envelope here and go, well, what if we actually store data in markup? I mean, it's basically JSON and markup are essentially the same thing with a different syntax. So some of this we're probably pushing a little too far, and we have to really figure it out. But we're trying to really explore this. Everything is an element. Every single thing on your page is a composable piece you can construct other things with. And then finally, the last major philosophical piece is less code. So don't repeat yourself is a really big deal for us. And we want developers to only write code that's unique to their app or unique to their element and nothing else. Arguably, we're pretty successful with that, and you can always get better. And that data binding, including data binding, which we haven't done before, greatly reduces code, and it's generally just a really awesome thing. I think Rob's demo is really going to show that off really strongly. All right, so what's this world? I've been talking about what Polymer is, what isn't, and all these different layers. We have a nice fancy slide for that. All right, so native, the bottom layer is the browser today, right? And in reality, this is a super rough surface with a lot of nooks and crannies where demons and dragons hide, and it's really pretty awful. And the idea of the platform layer of platform.js is it's a set of polyfills that lets everyone build to the same standards and puts them across browsers today. And the idea is this big purple box goes away completely. Polymer is this middle layer. So Polymer is a layer of sugar on top, and it gives you an easy way to build these composable elements. But this is our opinion. This will never go away. This is the thing the value we're providing. And then what you build with it is elements. So from sets of elements to individual elements, and we're working on this kind of actively right now. So when we think about how to use Polymer, there's really kind of two major ways. Using elements is the first one. So we think that like the vast majority of the world, they just want a particular element on their page, right? If they've got a button that's particularly cool, it has like some progress indicator, and they want to put it on their website and not think about it. And that's going to be the vast majority of this kind of usage, right? Like most people build selects, they don't recreate them from scratch. So this is kind of the majority case. But the majority case in this room and for developers is going to be creating elements. So we'll go over both of those. So using elements, we have a whole bunch of elements today. We've namespaced most of them core dash. We did a cleanup a couple of weeks ago where we put all the stuff that we weren't really concentrating on into a Polymer Labs organization and left everything in Polymer. And we originally had Polymer dash in every single element. And pretty much everyone who built Polymer elements kept calling their things Polymer dash. We realized that we needed to be kind of set a good example. So core dash is just a namespace that we're using for core utility things that can be reused in a lot of different places. But it's just a convention. And then as Eric touched on as well, like we have a whole bunch of non-visual elements that we've built in Polymer as well. I talked about core local storage before, and we have a whole bunch of others. And you can still see some Polymer dash stuff there that we haven't quite updated yet. I focused on this being an accurate slide as opposed to particularly sensical. And Polymer actually already has well over 100 elements at this point. You can actually check them out, the Polymer repo and then also the Polymer Labs organization. So to use an element, again, this is just kind of for everyone. The first step is to get the code. We tend to use Bower on the team, but you can also we have zips for everything. You can use GitHub. You can use whatever you want to use to get the code. So if you bower an element, and then you include platform.js at the top of your page, and this is what gives you the platform, the polyfills will fall back to the native code automatically as it goes. And then you import the element. This is an HTML import that Eric showed you. You do link rel and then the name of the element, and it's a .html file for the first time, right? You're not importing JavaScript, you're importing HTML. And then once you do that, you can just use the element anywhere on your page, and it just works. So it's really that simple to get going. But now creating elements is where it gets interesting, and this gets to where Polymer provides a lot of value. So we've created a Polymer-element, and this is kind of the base class of Polymer that you use to define your elements. So this one in particular just it's really, really simple. It actually has the NoScript attribute in there. It's just a template. So everything inside, so Polymer element, it's creating an element named my-element, which when you use it is the tag name you use. And it just has a template. And the template has CSS and some HTML. And this is about as simple as it can get, and it just puts out hello for my element. If you inspect it, it's a my element. And this just works today. But you can add a prototype to it if you want to add behaviors, you want to add properties and methods to your element. So in this case, we added a method for say hello, and on a click, it's going to do alert howdy folks. And we're missing some of the code here to make it a little simpler to read, but if I click on it, it says howdy folks. And then data binding is another big piece that we do. So in this case, we have a property on the prototype called Rob, or called owner. That's default value is Rob. And then if you use the mustache syntax actually in the HTML, and there's no other setup you have to do, it will just work. So when it renders, it puts Rob built me with Polymer. But you can publish those properties too. So if you want to publish an API for your element, you can add it to the attributes attribute, which is cleverly named, of course. In this case, it has a default value, but when you use it, you can override that value. User of that element can use that API to override that value, and it does when it renders. All right, but wait, you say, how do I use this with X? Where X is name a framework, name a technology, name some random thing that you found on the internet somewhere. So this is about interop, right? So Polymer elements are just custom elements. This is our story for this. And I put just in quotes because custom elements are really, really cool. Outside of the element boundary, so you have this element, it's got shadow DOM, so it's got some scope, has a boundary that can be pierced if you really want, but it's safe in there. Outside of that element boundary, looking in, they can be interacted with just like regular DOM elements. They have properties, they have methods, they have events. This is just useful. It's just like any other DOM element. Once you're inside that element boundary, that's where you get all the Polymer goodies. And the thing is, those Polymer goodies don't leak outside of that element boundary. So this lets Polymer play really nicely with lots and lots of other kinds of projects. So because you can just drop this element in, and it acts just like a regular DOM element. So for interop, it's a really, really good story. And you'll have instances where if you're inside of an element, there's things that need to know about shadow DOM. But basically, outside of the element, it's all good. You can share everything you want. Inside the element, you get all the goodies, but things have to be a little bit smarter. So the takeaway is this is a really, really big new thing. We're bootstrapping this ecosystem, and it's really for everyone. We're not going to be the first to do this, or the only people to do this. We expect a lot of other providers to do this, and individual developers to build elements and share them. We're creating technology for catalogs, standards for documentation, ways of distributing elements, and tooling, like we were showing you with the designer tool. And we're moving kind of on all of this all at once. And where we're going, so Polymer's in alpha right now. We said we were a pre-alpha for a fairly absurd amount of time. We changed that about 2 months ago now to alpha. We'll be beta once the native features ship in one browser. So what this looks like is Chrome 36, which is Canary right now. It'll be in the stable channel in the next 2 months. And then kind of at that point, we'll flip it to beta, because it's every time one of the native features comes in, there's a lot of churn right at the end where it works subtly differently than the polyfill does. And we have to reconcile the two. So we want to kind of avoid exposing people to that churn. But you'll see later on, right after the break, that there's a lot of crazy people who have actually built stuff on this already. And more power to them. So how can you help? You don't have to do a thing, because there's going to be a whole bunch of people here talking to you in a minute. You don't even have to move. Go to polymerproject.org and read more. You can tweet us. You can say you love us there, too. I'll assume you're talking about an actor. You can check us out on Stack Overflow. That's where we like all the questions to go. There's a Polymer dev mailing list. We really prefer the questions get there so everyone can see them. Build us something. Write an element, wrap an API, and share it. Join the revolution. And check back soon, because we'll be at Google I/O, and it'd be awesome to see you guys all there, too.
All right.